Angel's Egg, an anime film written and directed by Mamoru Oshii, was released in 1985. 3 years later, a hybrid live-action/animated film borrowed its animated portions from Angel's Egg. In the aftermath, Angels Never Sleep, written and directed by Carl Kolpart, was released in 1988. As of writing, Angel's Egg holds a 7.5 out of 10 on IMDb and a 4.1 out of 5 on Letterboxd. In the Aftermath holds a 4.6 out of 10 on IMDb and a 2.8 out of 5 on Letterboxd. Here's why I feel the ratings for both of these films are wrong. Angel's Egg recently had a 4K remaster released to theaters, which is really the genesis for this video being made. On a whim, I was invited to see this weird, artsy old anime at my local independent movie theater. I had never heard of Angel's Egg, but the theater listing described it as an anime art film. Along with a quick runtime of 71 minutes, I was sold on the idea. Worst case scenario, it would be an hour down the drain and a good conversation piece. The night of the screening, digital ticket pulled up on my phone. I arrived about 10 minutes early, expecting to walk straight in and sit with maybe a dozen other people in a mostly empty theater. There was a line out the door and down to the next block. I was stunned by the turnout, and so was the theater. The screening was delayed by almost 30 minutes as the couple of employees that were scheduled for what was expected to be a slow night were facing a crowd of a now sold-out show. I am unsure if my city is just ravenous for remasters of anime, or if this situation was happening in theaters throughout North America. Either way, the excitement of the crowd set the tone for the whole experience. Angel's Egg is in fact an art piece. Mamoru Oshii himself has expressed that there is no correct interpretation of what the plot is supposed to be. The symbolism and metaphors generated from a mostly wordless film are meant to stand on their own. Admittedly, the first 10 or so minutes of Angel's Egg had me concerned I was in for an hour of droning sounds and pretty gray backdrops. As the film progressed, I was drip-fed just enough information and intrigue to keep me invested. By the end, my mind caught up and realized the piece as a whole was one of the first movies of such an avant-garde nature that I didn't have to think on to form an opinion or do some mental gymnastics to justify why it was good. It just was. On the surface, the symbols and use of biblical references make the film seem to be a direct commentary on Christianity. In some respects, it is. But I feel that the message is more about faith in general. 50% of the dialogue is used to retell the story of Noah's Ark, with the exception of the ending being decidedly less hopeful. With so much of the limited script dedicated to this, it seems like a good place to start. In the Bible, Noah sends a raven to survey the land when the waters begin to recede. After waiting 7 days for the raven, it had not returned. Noah then sends a dove that returns with an olive leaf or branch to show that there is habitable land and life can continue on Earth. In Angel's Egg, the story ends after the bird does not return, and what is left of humanity eventually forgets that there ever even was a bird. Accepting the ark as what is and has always been, it is possible that, in translation, the specific type of bird was lost, but the meaning remains. With no sign of hope being returned from the void, or whatever existential force caused the flood, humanity can and will accept the new circumstances. This brings me to my main theory on one of our 3 main characters, the boy. Spending the entirety of his screen time lugging around a cross, it is fairly clear that he is meant as an analog for Jesus, or at least a Christ-like figure. Literally bearing the weight of the cross and metaphorically the sins of this world. We don't seem to get an answer on what these sins are or were. The boy is heralded into the world by shrill whistling from an otherworldly sphere that carries thousands of human figures, and his cross resembles more of a weapon than a device meant to torture the wielder. His heralding brings to mind the concept of the biblical rapture, where angelic trumpets blare and the faithful will be snatched into the sky to be with their Savior in heaven. In Angel's Egg, I believe the rapture being enacted on the girl's world is almost the opposite. The boy has arrived to administer a test to see who is faithful and finish the job that the floods were meant to do a long time ago. Seemingly the girl is the only human left, or the only human left with any sense of self-awareness, and becomes the singular target of the boy's tests. He is the bird finally returning to the ark, but has no olive branch to offer. Our second character is the girl. She is represented as young, I believe, with the intention to portray innocence. She is also a fairly blank slate, ideal for projecting onto. My reasoning for assuming she is being tested as opposed to saved by the boy is her first lines in the film. After failing the first test and allowing the egg to be taken by the boy, she responds to the boy asking, "What do you think is inside of that egg?" with a simple, "I can't tell you things like that. Besides, I don't even know who you are." The avoidant response reveals uncertainty in her faith, or at least a reluctance to espouse her beliefs to all who would listen. After the boy mentions that she needs to break the egg to know what is inside, the girl replies, "Who are you?" and then proceeds to run off. To continue the thread of the boy being a Christ figure, this test/interaction served two purposes. First off, to see if her faith was strong enough to withstand questioning, and second, to see if she could realize her faith in the egg is misplaced. Later in the film, the girl proclaims a stone bird will be born again through the egg, almost like a second coming. This claim again rebukes the idea that the boy is the second coming and he is the bird returning. In the final exchange of words between the boy and the girl, she is listening to the egg as she holds it close to her chest. The boy dismisses her claims of hearing breathing and wing flaps as her own breath and the sound of the wind. I believe by this point, the boy is exhausted by the girl's insistence upon worshipping the egg. This scene ends with the boy putting the girl to bed, and one last time, the girl inquires, "Who are you?" The boy replies in an almost sorrowful tone and asks her, "Who are you?" As the girl drifts off, her fate and the fate of her world will hinge on one final test. Our final main character, the namesake of the film, the egg. The egg does not speak or take any actions of its own will, but is the vehicle that seems to perpetuate what little speaking or action that takes place in the film. This little Schrodinger's box of faith represents the girl's unwillingness to test her faith, and at the same time, the blind faith that has been put into the egg. The culminating moment of the film is when the boy brings his cross down on the egg, cracking it. This begins the end. The girl screeches in pain and disbelief as her treasured idol seems to contain nothing of note. Her world and worldview are shattered as the flood waters rise above the city, and she resolves to jump into the waters below. In a more generous light, the closing scene of the film could be interpreted as the girl finally breaking free and ascending to the heavens along with the other human-shaped statues. However, I feel it is fairly easy to interpret aging rapidly, being turned to stone, and drifting into the skies, leaving the only world and life you have ever known, as more of a punishment than reward. As the boy said, Keep precious things inside you, or you will lose them. The girl no longer has a choice in the matter. Her and the egg will now never part. The fisherman. I'm not quite sure if the statuesque fish hunters were meant to have a major impact on the overarching themes, but here's my read. Their presence is ominous, and the shadow fish hunting scene is the most visually stimulating part of the film, and the spears and ropes they wield are just kind of really cool. At the end of the day, they are background noise to the main characters, and that goes both ways. The fishermen seem to only fixate on the fish, almost like the boy, the girl, and the egg are so far away from their thoughts that our main trio might as well not even exist to them. Which I think is their purpose. I believe the fishermen represent the unfaithful or atheistic portion of society. They keep their head down and get to work, doing what they need to do, even if their labor is often fruitless. They have adapted to the material conditions of their reality. Eggs, angels, and Jesus be damned. However, if the divine is real, they will be punished by the rain. Angel's Egg, especially the 4K remaster, is a beautiful art piece that explores the themes of faith and one's reaction to dire situations. I feel that regardless of one's personal relationship with faith in a traditional or alternative sense, there is something to take away from the film. I look forward to getting absolutely roasted in the comments as to why my interpretation is trash, or how I'm overreaching in my analysis, and Angel's Egg is just a self-indulgent 71 minutes of meaningless drivel that invokes biblical tales to seem like it has a point. Either way, your opinion is valid. Mine is just more valid. Angel's Egg sits at a solid 9 out of 10 or a 4.5 out of 5 for me. I do not have an endearing anecdote about going to see this movie at an indie theater during a sold-out screening. In fact, setting up an old PC that still had a disk drive to play the DVD was not the most pleasant experience. But I promise this has not made my interpretation and rating skew in either direction. More than half of the runtime of In the Aftermath, Angels Never Sleep is reused footage from Angel's Egg. The other half being live action segments that were filmed in a semi-abandoned industrial park in Southern California. However, all of the dialogue from Angel's Egg has been dubbed, and scenes are cut out of their original order to present a completely different and much more digestible story. Almost none of the original story remains intact, other than the fact that there is a girl and she does protect an egg. After about 4 minutes of running the intro to Angel's Egg, with the music and sound effects completely altered to give a more jovial air, along with cutting out the long droning shots of a dismal world, the first words are spoken between the girl, who is now known as Angel, and the boy, now known as Jonathan. This scene sets up a traditional younger sister, older brother dynamic, antagonistic in nature, but no true malice is intended.
Oh, my brother, he had plenty of advice for me. And I didn't want to hear it.
Angel's mission, assigned by Jonathan, is to save creatures with her energy that is seemingly connected to her egg. She alone is tasked with determining who or what is worth saving.
But I'm not ready yet.
Oh, you are. You'll need to judge who needs your help and who shouldn't have it. Remember, the devil lurks, so go nurture your egg, and when the time comes, save only those creatures who will blossom from your energy.
How will I be able to know who's deserving?
Our first live action segment begins as Angel runs off with her egg, and and sheds a feather that, by some force of divine intervention or magic, materializes as a normal feather at the foot of our two live-action protagonists, Goose and Frank's feet. Goose picks up the feather and sticks it in the breast pocket of his full hazmat suit, just below the hose for his oxygen mask. Both Goose and Frank are wearing identical outfits and are only distinguished through their voices, along with the fact that Frank carries a rifle. We enjoy a few minutes of the pair bantering and even singing as they trudge through a post-apocalyptic landscape in search of supplies. After passing by multiple corpses and finding nothing of value, Frank stumbles across a living man huffing what seems to be a mostly empty oxygen tank in the corner of an abandoned storage room.
Hey, Frank, look at this. It looks clean. Do you think it's from an eagle?
Not unless the eagle has a gas mask.
The unnamed man with the tank quickly becomes hostile after Frank foolishly states that he has days of oxygen, still at his and Goose's disposal. A rather uninspired fight sequence takes place between Frank and the man. It is notable that the hostile man wields a spear that is a replica of the fisherman's spears from Angel's Egg. I don't think the writers intended this as anything more than a cool prop to make and present. Following my interpretation of the fisherman also fits here. The hostile man is one of the unfaithful masses. He just wants to catch his fish and live another day. The fight ends when the hostile man strikes Frank across the mask and Frank falls to the floor. The man strips Frank of his suit and tanks. The man stops to grab the rifle that Frank previously set down on a desk and soon finds Goose tinkering with an oxygen tank outside. After a very brief standoff, Goose realizes the man is not Frank and asks, "Who are you?" This is the most repeated line in the original Angel's Egg. The hostile man proceeds to mag dump on Goose, instantly killing him. We cut back to Frank, who is shaking off his spear-induced concussion. As Frank makes his way to Goose, we get a voiceover, the live-action scene from Angel. She describes Frank as fiendish and beastly strong, but soon decides he's alright, after he puts the feather that was blasted out of Goose's pocket back in its place, and shows basic concern that his companion is dead. Angel then descends. It's not quite clear the standings of the universes here between animated and live action, but we'll assume she's above, and she descends. She then manifests in a live action form in front of Frank.
But I was too afraid.
Perhaps Goose was the Christ stand-in for In the Aftermath. His faith in picking up and carrying the angel feather and sacrificing himself so that Frank could demonstrate to Angel that mankind was worth saving. Chasing after Angel in a similar manner to the boy in Angel's Egg, Frank is led to an abandoned hospital and blacks out again. Frank awakens in a hospital bed hooked up to an IV and discovers he has been saved by a woman, Dr. Sarah Fallsberg. She is a rather adept survivor and has rigged the room they reside in to have a constant stream of oxygen. Sarah is revealed to the audience in a manner that suggests a women survivor is unexpected by Frank. Cutting back to an animated segment, the part of Angel's Egg where the boy tells the girl the story of Noah's Ark. However, the dialogue is replaced with some story about a character named Tazuria and his adventures on a mythical planet with flying fish. One day, Tazuria is betrayed by a friend and the planet's fish are harvested by the deceiver. This anecdote does not seem to have any foundation or link to any religious beliefs or stories. And in fact, if it is an original story made for In the Aftermath, it is possibly a cautionary tale from Jonathan to Angel about trusting the wrong people with your divine secrets.
Once there was a great traveler who knew many planets. He'd talk of them wherever he went. And people were eager to hear his stories.
Was Tazuria one of these planets?
It was his name.
Did you know him?
I met him once, and he told me this story.
We cut back to Frank doodling an image of Angel on the hospital room wall. So this warning is disregarded by Angel. What I think is a last-ditch effort by Jonathan to teach his little sister anything, he conjures the images of the fishermen hunting the fish of Tazuria's planet. This is where most of the original fish hunt scene from the animated Angel's Egg plays. Once again, we cut back to the live-action hospital room that Frank and Sarah are in, and they share a meal of nondescript slop and a reddish liquid. Apropos of nothing, Frank begins to play a song called Canavalito Tango on the piano. This piano is pulled from off-screen seemingly out of nowhere, and he serenades Sarah. As kind as I have been to this movie, I can't find any real reason for this scene to exist other than getting a catchy tune and a somewhat shoehorned romance plot into In the Aftermath. We then get to the scene in an animated portion that explains the reasoning for the full title of the movie, In the Aftermath, Angels Never Sleep. Angel, in fact, falls asleep. Her disembodied voice plays over the original Angel's Egg scene where the boy cracks the egg. Angel explains in this overdub that angels are not supposed to sleep, and her doing so after hearing Frank's piano playing was somehow neglectful of her duties. Angel, similar to the original Angel's Egg, screams and discovers the cracked egg in the morning. But not to worry, Jonathan was just once again attempting to instill any knowledge or lesson in Angel's mind. Jonathan proclaims he is the fairy of second chances, and he gives Angel her fourth, fifth, sixth chance to listen to him. And another egg. Angel should have been spanked by asteroids. Our journey ends in live action with Angel deciding that Frank does deserve the egg because he went out looking for her in the wasteland. She appears in her live action form and offers Frank the egg, which then shoots a magical blue beam into the sky, cleansing the world of its toxic post-apocalyptic miasma. And like that, with a nice little bow on top, the story is wrapped up. There's also a bit where we cut back to animation and Angel committing suicide, being turned to stone, and taking off aboard the Space Sigh. There was dialogue dubbed over this segment to play it off as Angel fulfilling her mission and being allowed to explore the stars.
Angel, I will say goodbye to you now. You have no need for me to be handing you eggs any longer. Go and grow. Take flight.
As I said at the beginning of this rant, I did not agree with the internet ratings of this movie. This was not because my personal score differs greatly. I just don't think it's possible to fairly judge In the Aftermath, having seen Angel's Egg previously. And there are two entirely different ratings depending on your knowledge of Angel's Egg. Pretending I know nothing or knew nothing of the original film, In the Aftermath, used as the basis of its story and writing, I more or less agree with the general consensus that In the Aftermath deserves around a 5 out of 10 or a 2.5 out of 5. A sometimes silly, sometimes nonsensical attempt to merge Eastern animation with Western live action. As someone who, in reality, really enjoyed Angel's Egg and cared enough to write this entire script, In the Aftermath gets zeros across the board from me. It makes me sad to think that there are people out there whose only interaction with Angel's Egg is through In the Aftermath, Angels Never Sleep, which is a soulless attempt at a cash grab perpetuated and necessitated by some sort of corporate acquisition of rights to a film that should have been left alone and immortalized in its own shrine instead of being... Whatever. Moral of the story, normies, keep your hands off of my avant-garde anime.